Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Modern Church Leader. Excited about today's talk. I'm all the way in San Diego, and Alicia Lee is coming to us all the way from New York. So we are on the opposite sides right now, but we're going to talk about her great company, Faithly, who has a great name. But Alicia, thanks for joining the show today.
Thank you so much, Frank. And yeah, I'm in downtown Manhattan, although you wouldn't know it from this soundproof studio that I'm in. But I promise, somewhere in the background are cobblestones and exposed brick and lots of New York City buildings.
All the good New York stuff. I've
Yeah.
not spent a lot of I've visited New York a handful of times, and my wife and I have gone out there a couple times just on weekend getaways. But I love the city. I love hanging out there. I'm not sure what it would be like to live there, like with a family, but it's always fun when we go visit.
Yeah, so I'm from New Jersey. It's not that far from New York. In fact, it's
Yeah.
close enough that you kind of grow up pretending like maybe you're from New York. But I moved here 20 years ago to work on Wall Street, and never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd still be here 20 years later and raising three small children, no less. But the Lord has made it clear this is where He's called us to. It's our mission field. And so I mean, I dream about moving to San Diego. I dream about moving to different places, but New York City is where I am. It's where I am.
I mean, it's a cool spot. What is it? Tell us, not the point of the show, but what's it like to raise kids in New York? Do you live in the city? Like, how do you do it? What's it like?
I think it can be really hard. It can be really easy. We have a good setup because we've been here a long time. Like, we know the value of proximity. So we don't try to make life difficult for ourselves. Like,
Right.
yeah, the best swim teacher might be uptown, but we don't need the best swim teacher. We just need an okay swim teacher. And the one next door is like, that's pretty good. So we
Right.
keep our life really proximate. And so for us, like home, church, school, it's all within like a 5 block radius. So from that
Oh,
standpoint, my
amazing.
life is actually, yeah, it's actually easier, I think, in some ways than being in the suburbs where you have to drive from place to place.
Right.
But as wonderful as the energy of New York is, and there's a unique energy, like there's no energy like New York City energy, it can be exhausting, right? Like at the end of every day, you need your little corner of the city to retreat into your
Yeah.
apartment, to kind of huddle up with your family, and that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can imagine that. I mean, you're right about the energy. That's probably what everybody can agree on, right? Like New York City energy is like incredible. Like I love walking around, but see, I don't do it every day. So it's like when we go visit, it's like, this is amazing. This is awesome. Let's go on the subway. Let's do everything because it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you love people and you love being around people, it's especially wonderful. Like I think I counted like 1,000 people on my way into work one day. Like just, you just walk a few blocks, like you go into the coffee shop, like you just run into 1,000 people,
Yeah.
and you're barely an hour into your day. But like I said, you need your corner of New York to retreat to at the end of the day because
Yeah.
it can be overwhelming.
No, that makes sense. Well, you're here to talk about Faithly, but you've done some cool stuff in your past. So you spent a bunch of time working in the finance space, but you're a Christian and serving your church. So I'd love to hear just a little bit about kind of your story and how you got to this point.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. So I moved to New York about 20 years ago to work at Goldman Sachs. And I ended up working there for almost 20 years. I didn't think I would. I didn't know what I would do, but it still amazes me today that that's where the Lord had me for so long.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why I was at Goldman for a long time is because, I was able to do different things. I didn't do just one job in the time that I
Right.
was there. So
Like
I had a
what part of the
chance to
business did you work in mostly? Or like what did you bounce around in one particular part, or did you kind of go all over the place and do a bunch of different things?
I kind of went all over the place. And I think that's one of the things that made it really cool and interesting for me. So, my
Yeah.
first handful of years, I was an analyst. That's the entry level job for when you start at an investment bank. I was an analyst in the investment banking division. So that's where you do things like M&A and you help to underwrite financing offerings like IPOs or debt offerings.
Right.
For a few years, I worked in our capital markets business where we helped venture funds to raise money and invest. And then for the last many years, gosh, like 8, 9, 10, 11 years, I worked on the trading floor. So I ran one of our sales desks on the equities trading floor, where before COVID, like we were the largest trading desk in the tri-state area. We had 800 people on the floor. And so talk about being surrounded by people, like a person like an inch to your right and an inch to your left. Like you have to like kind of like hold your ear to talk, because, you know, there are people like kind of talking and shouting all around you.
Yeah,
It is, there's nothing like it. It's really exciting.
that's crazy. So you did that for a long, long time. And then
Yeah.
one day you woke up and you're like, I think I'm going to start a faith tech company. And now you're doing that. Like how did you make the transition, or what's the story behind Faithly?
Yeah, so there are some days where it feels that abrupt, because I did do something for so long, and you know, I've been doing the new thing for, you know, less than a couple of years. But as I look back on it, I can see how the Lord brought me to this place. So about 10 years ago, I started going to my local church. It's called Lower Manhattan Community Church, and gosh, my the Lord used my church to powerfully transform my life. Like the people in my church, they took my faith and they turned it to the Lord, and my life has never been the same. And
Hmm.
so I dove headfirst into serving my church. Whatever was asked of me, I always said yes. I treated it like God was asking me. So
Yeah.
run a Bible study, yes. You know, help us to oversee the finances, sure, yes. Join the elder board, yes. And, you know, join the teaching team. You know, be one of the preachers, one of the teachers of this church, yes. And you know, I was kind of doing this along one track of my life, and then working at Goldman on the other track of my life. And a
Hmm.
couple of years ago, I sensed the Lord closing down the Goldman track of my life in the way that He does, you know, sort of slowly and gently, with closed doors and with sort of unrest, dissatisfaction. But He also gave me this strong sense that I was supposed to do something else. And as I was trying to figure out what that something else was, and frankly, I thought it was going to be in fintech, just because I've worked in finance for so long.
Yeah.
I was Yes, I was recruited to be the CEO of a faith tech company. A friend of mine who had been in my network for a long time and knew how important my faith was to me. She said, "Hey, we're incubating this faith tech startup within our venture studio. Would you come and run it? That's the only thing we're missing as a CEO." And I really thought about it. I met with their advisors, I met with their developers, I met with their whole team. But that wasn't the thing.
Mm.
But the moment I started to think along these lines, the moment where I started to imagine like the two tracks of my life coming together, I just felt the Lord press this vision upon me for Faithly, for something that can bring together those who serve the church. And once I started to think about it, once I started to dream about it, I couldn't do anything else. There was just nothing that I could do. I I couldn't even consider anything else. This is the only thing I wanted to spend any time or any energy thinking about or working on.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. What's Faithly? Like, I mean, I know, but for the audience, what is it, and how long have you guys been at it, and how's things going?
So Faithly is, I think, best described as LinkedIn only for ministry. Now,
Yeah.
there are a lot of ways in which we're different from LinkedIn, and we're going to continue to be different from LinkedIn, but I think that's the best starting place for understanding Faithly, because it is a place for connection. It's a platform that is somewhere between a social and a professional network. Um,
Hmm.
it's like kind of that in between. And so I think LinkedIn, because it sort of hones in on professional identity, I think it's the closest analogy for us. But you and
Right.
I both know that ministry is not a profession, right? It is in a sense, but it's so much more. It's a calling.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so, you know, already we're like a year and a half, 2 years into this. We're already taking a lot of departures away from LinkedIn, but it's still, I think, the best way to help people quickly understand what it is we're
Hmm.
trying to do. We're trying to be a platform where folks who are pastors or church staff or lay leaders or volunteers of their churches, parachurches, Christian nonprofits, any organization really that's serving the kingdom, where they can come and create an authentic ministry identity, right? There's nowhere else in the digital space where you can do that.
Hmm.
Um, Once you do that, the potential to connect and create community and collaborate, I think really starts to open up for ministry.
Right. Yeah. When you had the idea, or what, like, how did the idea shape up in your head when you first started thinking about it? Did you think LinkedIn for ministry staff or LinkedIn for pastors, or was it some other thing? And then eventually you were like, oh, this is kind of like LinkedIn for ministry folks.
No, it was LinkedIn for pastors. But
Yeah.
my definition of pastor, I think, is broader than some people's definition of pastor, maybe because I've always been a volunteer at the church. I consider
Right.
myself to be in ministry. And I know that a lot of folks out there are doing it in that way, right? They're
Right.
bivocational or they're a volunteer. And so I've always thought about it for pastors, but with a very wide and very inclusive definition of pastor.
Right.
And what I realized quickly, and this isn't why I started it, but it became an important reference point for me. And this is what I mean, by the way, when I say, yeah, it feels really sudden, but the Lord's been laying the groundwork. Not too many years ago, I helped to lead the distribution of an IPO for a company called Doximity, which is LinkedIn just for doctors.
Yeah.
And I really got deep in this company, like was really focused on it. It was a really important IPO for my business at the time. And I remember being like just blown away by the gross margins and the growth and just the power of collecting this niche audience.
Right.
And I did that. We did so many IPOs at Goldman, right? Like especially in the post-COVID period when there was this
Right.
huge tech bubble, and this huge IPO bubble. We did it, and I quickly forgot about it. But here I arrived at this moment where the Lord placed this vision on my heart, and very quickly I realized, wait, I know this business. I've gotten my hands dirty with this business. And so that was a huge reference point for me. It kind of helped to validate for me that this can be a really thriving business model that can grow beyond just my two hands.
Right. Yeah. 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 That's pretty cool. I've heard of that. What it's called, Doximity. Is
Doximity,
that
yeah.
the? Yeah. Yeah. I've heard of that one before, on another podcast I listened to, and they were talking about like niche communities and just the
Yeah.
power that that has. So it totally makes sense to me. So you're a few years in. When did you guys launch officially?
We launched a couple of years ago,
Okay.
and we launched really small. We said, we don't really know what LinkedIn for Ministry looks like yet. So let's experiment in a really low risk way with a very specific niche within our niche. And we started out saying, let's talk to children's ministers. Let's try to create an environment where children's ministers feel really welcome and really
Yeah.
connected. And we went to the Orange Conference in Atlanta, and we talked to thousands of children ministers. We had lots of them join our platform, and we had conversations with lots of them. And we said, you know what, this is starting to make sense to us. And as we started to grow from 20 to 200 to in the thousands of members, we said it's time to open up our doors to a wider audience and start to look like the diverse community of those in ministry that we want to be someday, like in
Hmm.
with scale. So we started to do that at the beginning of this year. We started to sort of redesign and rebrand to welcome a larger audience. We went to some more events where we were meeting lead pastors and other layers of the church, and so we're out there doing that. We're out there doing that in this phase.
Yeah. 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 So kind of like this year is your larger scale launch to like the whole church, if you will, like anybody in some
Yeah.
sort of ministry role. Now you're out there and getting known. And you said, you were mentioning this at the beginning, you were at Catalyst and somehow by the Tithely booth or something like that, and people were Tithely and Faithfully, man, we got good names.
Yeah, that's right. So we were at Exponential. We'd love to go to
Exponential, cool.
Catalyst at some point. I've heard great things about that conference, but we were at Exponential and it was awesome. I mean, just awesome energy. We met thousands of pastors who came through this conference in Orlando, and actually we were
Hmm.
nowhere near the Tithely booth. Nowhere near. We were
Oh,
in a
you weren't
different
next to
building,
each other.
but
Okay. Yeah.
oh no, but people came by our table and said, "Hey, Tithely is so great. We love Tithely," and we said, well, "So do we, but we're not Tithely. But let us tell you about Faithly." So
Totally.
we are we are in those early days where people haven't heard of us yet, and so it's actually
Yeah.
really exciting to tell people about who we are and what we're trying to do. And I think we're going to be in that phase for a while. I think one of the things that one of the things that we've learned over the past couple of years is that when you're trying to build something in the ministry space, um, it it moves at the pace of relationship, right? Like
Yeah.
your sort of typical ways of trying to get the word out there, of trying to build your membership, they're not going to be effective in a space like ministry where it's about getting face to face with people, shaking their hand and telling them, who you are, finding out who they are, and growing in that way. And you sort of add on top of that we're trying to start a network, right? And any network, there's this huge, like, sort of chicken and egg, like, you got to get the flywheel moving. And we
Right.
just know for us that this is going to have to be a really patient build. Like, this is not
Right.
a, hey, like, we're going to market this for a couple of years and boom, we're going to be what we're supposed to be. And no, this is going to be like in 10 years when I talk to you, Frank, you're going to be, hey, Alicia, remember when we talked 10 years ago and now you're a little bit bigger and you look more like what you thought you were going to be. But like, it's going to be that kind of an effort, I think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting, I'm sure LinkedIn took a long time to grow. Social networks are like, it's a different thing. You're right. Like operating
Yeah.
in the church, like, it's highly relational. People want to know who you are and kind of what you're all about and what the business is all about. And then, yeah, you got to get, what's the incentive for people to come and be part of the platform before there's a network, and how do you create that and all that. So it's gonna be fun to watch you guys go after it for the next who knows, 10, 20 years. So it's pretty cool though. Like, what have you seen in the early days? Like, what kind of feedback are you getting, and what kind of churches or ministry professionals are kind of finding value in it in the current couple of years?
Yeah. So, well, we've learned a couple of things. We have learned that actually we are building something that is quite unique in the faith tech, Christian tech space. There's a lot that's been built, that's being built, that is awesome, but that is way more sort of intra-church focused. Like, how can I help the church be the church and serve its
Hmm.
congregation and maybe grow its congregation? We have not really seen anything that's more of an inter-church platform, right? Which allows for connection between pastors of different churches,
Right.
um, between churches, between denominations. And we're really excited by that because if there's one scripture that lit us up when we first started Faithfully, it was Acts chapter 2, verse 1. On the day of Pentecost, they were all together in one place. Like, we know that there's just this massive power in bringing believers together. What kind of power can be unlocked if we bring the leaders together, right?
Right.
Those who are serving the church. And so this opportunity really to bring churches and denominations and church leaders together, like, we are on fire for that. So
Yeah.
we saw right away that once we got to know the space, so to speak, like, wow, no one's really doing this, right? So that's number one. Number two, we thought we were building a community for pastors to join, and we are. But very quickly, we heard that the ministry need they have, yes, they want to be a part of a community, but they're all trying to build their own community.
Hmm.
Everyone's community building needs that was their number one need. And so we quickly realized, like, if we're going to attract people to Faithfully, we've got to give them actual tools, like practical tools to build the community they want to build. I'll give you a couple of examples. Like, when we were working very early on with children's ministers, what we heard from almost every children's minister we talked to was, my most pressing need is I've got VBS coming up. And
Right.
the best way, the
Doesn't
best
surprise
and
me.
only way, yeah, the best and really the only way to put on, like, the best VBS for my community is to give those who are running it and leading it a sense that they're doing it together, to create a community across the staff and the volunteers who are doing the VBS. And they said, well, if only we had a digital tool that helped us to sort of collaborate and connect around that. So, like, that was the first, like, need that we heard. And from as we started to talk to those across other layers of the church, we heard similar things about this need to create community. Like, I really feel pressed upon by the Lord to bring together the lead pastors of, like, all the lead pastors within my zip code. But there's not a
Hmm.
great way to do that. People will talk about different technology that they kind of cobble together, patch together to do ministry, but there's not one thing that really serves all of their digital needs. So that's how Faithfully Groups was born. We created a tool that's kind of like Facebook groups, but just for ministry, right? Like you're
Right.
not going to find a prayer board in Facebook groups. You're not going to find like those, or you're not going to find like a drive the way that we've set it up to be so flexible. So if you're running a missions trip and you're uploading a map, like that works. If you're uploading, a contact list, that works. We've set it up uniquely based on thousands of conversations we've had with ministry leaders about what do you
Right.
need a Faithly group for. So we've put that tool into people's hands so that they can create the community that they need to within the context of their ministry. So that's a very long way of telling you that that's another big learning for us over the last couple of years is, yes, we're creating a community, but we're giving our members the tools they need to create their own community.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I would say another learning that we've had that we're building for is, and I think this is how we're going to be very uniquely different from a Facebook or a LinkedIn. In the ministry world, um, you can't create a platform with, I think, the goal of keeping everyone on the platform, right? Like Facebook, LinkedIn, it's all about keeping people on the platform. Oh, you want to buy something? Buy something on my platform. You want to
Right.
like connect with someone? Do it on the platform. For ministry, the ability to go from offline to online, online to offline seamlessly is really important when you're talking about connection and community and ministry. And so the way that we're expressing that is through Faithly events. It's kind of like Eventbrite. You can do registration and ticketing for ministry events. And it's something that, we're really excited about. We've seen people start to use and be excited about.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very cool. Have you seen just from the kind of core, I guess, like having a profile, connecting with other people, like what's that dynamic been like? Are you seeing church leaders from kind of all over? I'm not sure if you're global yet or if it's mostly US based so far or kind of how you're doing it, but are you seeing those kind of connections and that activity, like early signs of that activity being a real thing versus people doing it on, like you said, Facebook or,
Yeah.
anywhere else?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that question. We've seen it. It is incredibly exciting. It's why we're doing what we're doing. And every time we hear a story about it, or someone throws us a tidbit, like we're having a celebration because it's working. Like we've
Right.
seen a lot of early points of validation around the greater potential to connect from a ministry identity. So first of all, we've seen people create more authentic digital profiles on Faithly. Like we will sometimes look, oh, like this is like so-and-so pastor from Texas, and we'll pull up their LinkedIn and we'll see, oh, they're actually sharing their call to ministry in their Faithly profile. Like they're sharing, like their dad was a pastor and that's how they got introduced to it. Like they're not sharing that on LinkedIn, right? We'll
Right.
look at someone else's LinkedIn profile who's on Faithly, and gosh, on their LinkedIn profile, it'll say that they're maybe a creative director. It won't even say that they're a pastor. And I don't think anyone's in hiding, but when you are on a platform like LinkedIn, you start to follow the cues there and you
Right.
start to
Yeah.
blend a little bit.
Yeah.
So
You're
we've
trying to
seen
use more
more.
generic language and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, because when you want it to make sense to people, like what you don't want
Right.
to use language or titles or a role that will only make sense to people in the church. Like you want to get out there. So, but so we're seeing people create authentic profiles. We're also seeing people connect, and we've heard stories from people of, oh, like I have a Zoom scheduled with so and so who reached out to me saying like I have something to offer you on this thing that I think could really help you in this church that you're in. So that is really cool. We've seen people. We saw someone at one of the conferences we went to who said, "Hey, I met this person on Faithly, and I never met them in real life, and now I'm meeting them at the conference." And so, like I said, like when we hear these tidbits and hear these stories, we're like, "Wow, it's working! Like people are connecting, and that connection is happening on the basis of authentic ministry identity."
Right. Yeah. No, I love that. Well, it's super cool. I mean, what's next for you guys? Like, where are you headed with the platform? How you trying to get the word out? I mean, you're on a podcast, so obviously that kind of stuff, but it sounds like you're starting to go to some conferences and all of that. But yeah, what's next for you guys?
Well, I think what's next for us is to try to get to that scale where it will really, really enhance people's connections in their community, right? Like we've seen that the things that we've built can
Hmm.
do it. And it's just like you said, Frank. It's like if you want to create a network that's valuable to people, the scale really does matter. Like the
Right.
bigger we get, the more valuable it will be to our members, the more they can reach into our platform and find things that will help them in their ministry. And so our biggest focus is getting the word out there about ourselves. Like you said, going to conferences, trying to talk to people on podcasts like yours, Frank, where we know that your community that you've built here and that your audience, they're all ministry minded, and we
Hmm.
really believe that we can add value to what they're doing. We've learned that this moves at the pace of relationships, so we are not in a hurry. We're not going to be out there sending thousands of cold emails to people hoping that they click on. It's not going to it's not going to look like what sort of typical tech software marketing. But yeah, we're experimenting with all of that, and I'm very excited to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. What's the team look like right now? Like, how many team members do you have, and what roles? Is it mostly engineers? What's all that look like?
So right now it's basically me and my co-founder. Like, we are starting very lean. We don't want to build until we really
Right.
know what we're building. And so my co-founder, he is my technical co-founder, meaning he's the full stack software engineer that has written
Got it.
every line of code on Faithfully. He's actually a former pastor. So he went to seminary, was a pastor for 10 years, got kind of burnt out and said, I think I'm going to be doing something else for a while. I think I'm going to come back to ministry, but for now I got to pay my seminary loans. And so I'm
Right.
going to go to App Academy, retrain as a software engineer. And he did that, worked at startups for a couple of years before he and I actually met on AngelList. Have you been on AngelList, Frank?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think
For
it's
sure.
called something else now. I think it's called WellFound now, but um, that's another example of a LinkedIn for a niche community, right? It's
Right.
LinkedIn just for startups. Well, when I started Faithfully, I put out a call for a technical co-founder, and I met and talked to a lot of people, but he was the only one I met who was a pastor and a software engineer. Oh, and lives in New
Like,
York City. And oh,
right.
has always dreamed about putting all those things together to build something for the kingdom. So, we were from the first conversation, we were off to the races. And we have a board
That's
of
very cool.
advisors. We have three guys who are like New York City. We have a built in New York mentality, and we have three
Right.
guys who are pastors, ministry leaders who've been doing it for a long time, who are all New York City guys who are doing this along with us. And so yeah, we're excited to grow. We want to grow our team, but yeah, I think for us it's all about that patient build.
Yeah. Yeah. No rush. You want to figure out, as they say, product market fit, right? You're in that stage of trying to figure out how to make that happen. But it sounds like you're getting good feedback, and like you're getting to some shows and talking to pastors and church leaders and ministry folks. And it's a cool product. Like, it's really cool that you guys are out doing what you're doing. So we will help spread the word for sure over on the Tithely side.
Cool. Thank you, Frank. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Where should folks go? Like, what's the website? How do people go create a profile? What do you want folks to do?
Yeah, so go to our site. It's faithly, faithly.co, not .com, .co. It turns out that M stands for money. It was just way too expensive for us. So we're faithly.co, at least for now.
Totally. We understand. We went with tithe.ly for the same reason.
Yeah,
Very cool. So faithly.co, go check it out, guys. And Alicia, it was great to have you on. It's great to meet you.
thank you. Thank you, Frank. Great to meet you.
Yeah, love it. Well, guys, definitely go check out Faithly, and we will see you next week on another episode of Modern Church Leader. See ya.